Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife Podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. I'm so looking forward to sharing this week's episode with you, but before we begin, I'd like to thank a wonderful listener who goes by the name of Kegels123, who has taken the time to leave this review. Listening to Jo's podcast on redefining middle age is an absolute breath of fresh air. It has provided me with the impetus and the desire to move into the second phase of my life with gusto. Listening to Jo is akin to chatting with a good friend at the kitchen table. She is warm, yet supportive, is able to look at life through the lens of humour, yet also has so much substance. I was curious recently to listen to the new Meghan Markle podcast as it contained much hype, but it was actually the life lessons from Jo's interviews that stayed with me. She intuitively knows what we as middle-aged women both need and want. Wow, thank you so much for such beautiful words. And this is exactly why I started the podcast, to let women in their 40s, 50s and beyond know that they aren't alone in this phase of life, and for you to meet some amazing everyday women who are all living their midlife differently, as well as introduce you to incredible experts, like today's guest, who together will help us to live our best lives. Today I'm speaking with Dr Sascha Kowalenko. Dr Sascha is a clinical psychologist with over 20 years experience. She's a mentor, facilitator, and leader who is passionately driven to impact generational change by leading women to harness their power of their mind, body, and spirit so that they can maximize their impact in their family, their life, their career, and business. Dr. Sascha works one-to-one with many women in their families, as well as with other health practitioners. And together with her own experience of womanhood, motherhood, and life, she brings a unique insight into her work. She's driven by a deep sense of purpose in ensuring that high-achieving women feel less alone, less guilt, overwhelm, angst, and the feelings of imposter syndrome. Dr. Sascha facilitates groups of like-minded and spirited women to join together via courses, coaching, and luxe retreats in person and online. In this episode, Dr. Sascha and I cover a wide range of topics, from the issues that this phase of life may bring to some women, such as the increase in anxiety and depression that can occur during perimenopause, as well as the stresses of combining family, work, and aging parents. We also discuss how we can best support our mental and our physical well-being. I hope you learn as much as I did from this amazing episode. So lovely to have Sascha on our podcast of Redefining Midlife today. And Sascha, being a trained psychologist, is going to come to some of these issues that we're going to be talking about with different eyes, not only eyes of a woman who is going through midlife and just the ups and downs of midlife and life as it happens for many people, but also for Sascha, how you work with women in your space and what you see midlife women sometimes going through. So it is such a huge time of change for women in very many aspects, because midlife can range between your 40s to your 50s. So, you know, some women have got the challenges of children, young children, older children, parents who are dying. It's often known as that sandwich generation as well. So I'm just wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about what you see with the women that you have coming through your work and the sorts of issues that they have.
Well, thank you for having me, Jo, and for, I guess, creating space to talk about these issues, because I think that's probably one of the uniting variables of women that I see in my clinical psychology practice. So I guess there's a bit of a backstory to that. But to make this explicit, it might sound quite obvious, but women are normally coming because there's some aspect of distress that they're experiencing in their life. And they might be really clear about what that's about. There might have been a particular event, context of relationships or work, or, as you said, you know, stress around caring for others. So they might be aware of that. But really what our process is to understand and try to, I guess, start to tease out all the different things that can potentially be going on that are contributing to that sense of distress that might show itself as anxiety or low mood, depression, that type of thing, being really stressed. They're probably the three sort of core pillars of reasons why people come to see a psychologist. And I got a little bit off track there in saying, so both it's, initially trying to understand and unpack the layers, and I'll talk about that in just a sec. But the thing that I feel like most women pretty much without a doubt experience is a sense of being quite alone in their journey and alone in those feelings that they're having, particularly at that time of life, as you said, that I'm in as well, in that midlife period, that there's something sort of unique to their experience. And what I know to be true, and I know you know to be true, Jo, it's why you're championing this work, is that they're not alone.
And that's what I'd like to come across too with the interviews that I do with the everyday ordinary woman, not just having superstars out there talking about their experience. It's what everyday ordinary women go through. And it's so right that we go through periods of time in our life where things aren't always, fairy glitter and rainbows and unicorns. There's some really tough things that we go through. And you can talk to sometimes a special person or a partner, or you might have some close-knit girlfriends, but quite often it's not until somebody might get to that point of, I'm ready to explode if I don't get some of this stuff out of my head. So do women come to you, Sasha, when they could be doing perhaps some other things to help support themselves along the way? Like, what do you see that we should be doing if things get a little tricky?
Yes, well, that's definitely it, Jo. And this goes across the age range, but I think it's particularly women in the demographic that we're talking about that are particularly vulnerable to what I'm going to say next. Is the starting point for all women, and I said it's most people, is that so much of the basics, the foundations of well-being have been neglected. And by foundations, what I'm talking about, and I have a acronym for this, which I think is a really important one to share and that I come back to time and time again, which is nests. So it's a hard one to get out, NESTS. So again, this is going to sound really basic, but for the vast majority, I can't think of any women that I have worked with, these are the things that they aren't attending to. So N is nutrition and hydration. E, exercise and movement. S, sleep or rest. T, time alone, time with others. S, again, for support. Really, a lot of my work, initial sessions with women, is really checking in on those things, because in terms of the next layer of work that we often need to do, and not always, but is often, sort of deeper thinking work about whether that be about the future or thinking about things that have happened in the past. In my experience, unless we're sort of in an optimal state of functioning, it's very hard to have those conversations or to have those thoughts and capacity for reflection. And then as it relates to, I guess, experiences of stress, anxiety, depression, burnout, they're really, in my, most of my experience, they're reflective of a lack of ability to attend to some of those basics. And women are essentially, they're running on empty. They're running on empty, but they are carrying the load of, a semi-trailer truck or so forth in the process, literally.
Yeah. And I can identify that well and truly, because when you are in the depths of, there's a lot going on in your life, what often happens is that the things that you know that you should be doing, you don't do. Even it's counterintuitive, because it works. It's really supportive to be able to eat well and to get yourself to bed at night or to move your body. But when you're sometimes in that state of there's so much going on, you can't really get yourself to that point, or as often as probably what you should, and prioritize yourself. And martyrdom in women too can sometimes be an issue, can't it? Do you find that where no one can do it better than me, so I'm going to take that on as well, and we just layer upon layer.
And martyrdom, I guess, is one way to one aspect of it, but I think it's also, I guess that's where the martyrdom comes from, is that generations and generations of expectations and structures that reinforce us doing all the things as well. And not just doing all the things, but being at the bottom of the list as well, that we must sacrifice ourselves. We must do everything for everybody else to be a good mother, be a good partner, or all of the things.
when you were talking about that, the generations of that, I just look at my own mother who gave up so much of what she could have been in her life for her family. And maybe,
Yes.
I don't know if it was, well, I do know, it was a generational thing.
Yes.
But also,
yes.
I just wonder how much I would have struggled had I been in that generation, because that's just so different to how I think and what I believe. But perhaps if you're immersed in that all the time and people around you are doing what you're doing, it may have been different.
I think it's definitely, and that's exactly why those, history is repeated for many, many years. And so that I feel, and again, that's a conversation that I'm having often, is to just, and it's not that we can do anything about that, Jo, but it's important to make it explicit that that's in our world as well. I often think about this with my own experience with my kids. It might sound like this is going to sound a little bit selfish at times, but it's interesting that I preface what I'm going to say next with that. But for example, when serving up dinner and you make sure that everybody else has within reason what they want and the right amount, and if someone wants more and I haven't got more there to give, you give the last bit off your plate, things like that. Again, you sort of take for granted. And I know that's maybe a bit of a silly example, but it's those small things, I guess, that can mount where we say, oh, well, this person needs that more than them, or I should do this rather than do that. And that's why we end up at the bottom of the list, because we think that other people's needs are more important than ours. And that can come from those social gender messaging that's just, I think, ingrained in many of us. But sometimes, and this is what I referenced a little bit earlier, sometimes our vulnerability to, I guess, falling into those patterns is also more specific to our own family of origin and what we've been exposed to, and our core belief system, the beliefs that we have about ourselves and other people and the world in general. It's not as simple as just saying, I'm not going to look after myself. There's multi-layers to it, because like you said, logically, we're all intelligent women. We know what we need to do, but we don't do it. So why is that so?
And that would also be a cultural aspect for some women as well, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Because even in today's society, although it has changed quite a lot from our mother's generation, for some women who are living in a different cultural group, that may still be well and truly entrenched and a part of their everyday experience as well.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And then I think, in some respects, it's a perfect storm that can happen there. So even if you're in that cultural I suppose, in some way, but you're exposed to other ways of doing and being through, as we are, social media and everything, all the media forms, that can create, I guess, a capacity for comparison and thinking, well, I want something different, or I want things to be different.
Yes.
And that can then in itself be, when coming back to your initial question, I guess, a sort of a source of distress. There's a dissonance, a gap between where we want to be and where we think maybe we should be, and there where we actually are.
Yes.
And how do we close that gap?
You've been a clinical psychologist for some time now, so are you seeing differences with the women coming in the earlier stages of their midlife compared to what it was when I suppose you're seeing it through different eyes as well, being you're more mature now, so you can probably relate a lot more to, because I think back when my early teaching days, when I wasn't a mother, I became a very different teacher when I had my children. And I think that comes part and parcel. So are you seeing things differently, or women presenting differently?
I actually don't know, Jo, for exactly the reason that you said. I don't know that I could give an evidence-based answer to that, because there's no doubt I'm seeing things differently because of my own experience. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I have to give that some thought. I guess what I was thinking about when you initially said that, and this isn't bang on that question. So I see women across the age span, across the lifespans. I see little kids, I see teenage girls, I work with teenage girls, I see girls in early adult years through to that midlife period and beyond. And what I've been mindful of or noticing more is the conversations that I'm having with the younger women, so women younger than myself, which they are certainly different conversations, but not at the same time, because I guess it encourages. Sorry, I'm just literally thinking about this as we talk, so I'm sorry if it's a bit muddled, but I guess you can sort of see based on our own experiences and the things that we're talking about now, what they're thinking about and what they think's to come. Yeah, sorry, that's not really an answer or a question or anything like that, but it's just interesting. Thank you for prompting me about that journey, I guess, and how our experience is, of course, impacted by our experience ourselves.
Well, you
I think that's what I'm saying.
You come with so many more different life
Yeah.
experiences, don't you? The older you get, the more you've had happen to you, around you, and with the people that you love and have connected with, whether it be their close connections or not, you've seen and experienced a lot more. So therefore, you've got the worldly eyes and the wise eyes. And that's where I think probably only now, because we live in such an ageist society, yet this is the time where I think a lot more women are standing up and saying, well, no, we know a lot more than what you're giving us credit for, and to be recognised for a lot of what we've gone through, in that we do have a lot more to give, and we can be seen as somebody who can help others in a way that perhaps our parents or our mothers weren't able to. And that might be a good thing for the younger women coming through.
Yes. And I think, sorry, it's probably taken a while to put those pieces together for me, but I think what I'm seeing as a difference, again, maybe it was there and I just didn't have the eyes on it because everything that you've just said in terms of experience. There is a movement about along all the lines of those things that you're saying, that to come back to another point a bit earlier, that we have a right, we can be mothers and care for kids and show up for our family and those, elders in our family, young people in our family. We can do all of those caring, nurturing roles that have defined us for many, many years, but we can also do other things and be other things as well. And essentially you can do all the things, not to say that you can do them all at once and that it's not challenging, but there is more to us than just those predefined and stereotyped roles. And I feel like there's a greater power in a lot of conversations that I'm seeing with women, particularly in the midlife range. But again, I don't know if that's that has changed over generations, or that is just what comes with being in this part of life. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And there's so many decades left to live, and having the eyes that we've got now and the life experiences that we've got now, there's still so many great things that can be achieved. And that's it's wonderful that you're seeing that and you're being able to encourage that in the women that you work with. And also in what I'm trying to do is very much like the nests that you were talking about, is empowering women to go, there are small little things that you can do every day to add value and enrich your lives. And because you've got a long time yet to live, we want to live that as fully as we possibly can and embrace what's to come.
Yeah. And it's interesting. That is the thing I am, sorry, Jo, just to round that off with the younger women, that I do say explicitly, because I sense this and or we'll talk about it explicitly, is that there is time. You have time. You might feel like mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, that you're running out of time. And of course there's a biological considerations there in the sense of pursuing your goals and having the impact that you want. There is so much yet to come. Yeah.
Did your mother talk about this phase of life at all, or does she discuss that with you, what she went through, her transition years and what it was like for her?
No, I was thinking about that this morning, Jo, and thinking about our conversation today. And I feel like this is true for a number of different aspects of life, and maybe what is a bit different now than what it was in previous generations, where I don't believe that there was these explicit conversations. No, I don't recall that happening. And I think that's a function of many things, individual relationship aspects, circumstances of life, the generational piece as well. So that is actually, now that we're talking about it, I feel like that's something that is a bit different that we are, and that is being driven by technology and availability of, obviously, technology and ability to connect, that we are now having these conversations.
And do you think you would ever talk to your mother about it? I'm thinking with my own mother, like she's passed away a couple of years ago, and she wasn't at the point of where I could have that sort of conversations for a number of years prior to that.
Yeah.
But it'd be an interesting time for you to sit down with your mother and just get thoughts of. I mean, obviously they're going to be very different because different person, different life, different generation. But
Yes, yes. And I guess we have to some degree in terms of, knowing, and it is different because I have different, I think, that certainly very shared values, core values, but in terms of goals and career aspirations and things like that, that looks different. So I guess we've very much been clear in having those conversations about what's important in life. Definitely that piece of it. Which again, I don't know that a lot of those things are always made explicit in family and relationship conversations.
That's true. Did your mother, or has your mother discussed what her actual transition time was like the perimenopause years was like? Has she ever talked to you about that?
Yeah, and more, yes, talked about it, but also I guess I am, and I still am, with her through those times. So it's been the learning that has come through witnessing her journey as well.
Okay. Yeah. Because so many women don't get to talk to their mothers about that.
Yes,
what they went through.
Yes. But interestingly, and sorry, Jo, if I'm sounding a bit, I'm literally processing stuff as we talk, which is really fantastic for me. When you asked about, I guess, that transition into midlife, and I'm thinking particularly around 40s, and I guess where that aligns with the perimenopausal period. And as you know, and talk obviously so much wisely about, is that it's those conversations that even now are only just being had because it wasn't really known to be a thing. So, but menopause, yes, we know that. But again, the context has been that's like, I think you did a post about this recently, that being like the beginning of the end almost. Well, it has been prefaced as that. So those conversations are okay, but that piece in the middle, no.
And that's where a lot of women sit in silence, don't they? Because they, again, as we started our conversation, thinking you're the only one going through something when in fact you're not. And to normalise it and have that as a conversation piece.
Exactly. And I'm very mindful of, and I guess this fits with my broader practice framework with any person that I'm working with, but I think it's particularly relevant to women and women in the midlife period, is to be, again, coming back to what I said before, my role when I'm working as a psychologist particularly, where just by nature and the nature of our healthcare system, clients, women are coming in distress of some type. So in terms of making sense of what's contributing to that, and sometimes, as I said, there's clear triggers, but it's also not always that. And I feel it's very important to take into account, our physical state, our hormonal state, where we're at in those transitional periods of life, because that can account for a lot of some of that distress too, being driven sort of more from a, from bottom up perspective as opposed to top down, and then the interaction between the two.
Oh, well, I was reading something the other day from studies have shown that women going through perimenopause, in fact, can be 2 times more likely to exhibit signs of anxiety and 2 to 4 times more likely to have depression. Now, these are the sorts of things that women need to know about, so we can catch things in that early stage and do the small little things. Like in my membership, we talk about the 6 pillars of wellness, and very similar to your nest, what can you do to make sure that you're looking after yourself? So should these things happen, they're going to be at a minimized level compared to what they would be if you weren't sleeping properly, you weren't eating right, you weren't trying to manage the stresses that were in your life. But knowing that hormonal fluctuations can be a trigger for women who may not have exhibited these sorts of mental ill health periods, that's really important.
Yes. Yeah, because in some respects, it's a process of elimination. So if you've got those basics covered, you can say, okay, well, I am, all things being considered, I should be sort of in, the phrase I use is my optimal zone of functioning. I'm where I should be. I've got, some bandwidth to be able to tolerate stress, to be able to think clearly, manage stress and big emotions. And then if there's bigger fluctuations beyond that, well, then certainly that's going to probably lead towards thinking about what's going on hormonally. Not always. There's other things in there as well. But I feel like if you've got those basics covered, then you know what you're dealing with. And like you said, Jo, then you're in the best possible place to be able to manage what is going to be inevitable as well in terms of those fluctuations.
Yeah, having that knowledge beforehand is so important for women to have. And It's great now that it's starting to be talked about more often, but the concern is sometimes too is that the society that we live in, because it's such a fast-paced society, that sometimes the overwhelm can stop women from getting that help at an earlier stage. So what sort of things
Yes.
do you do, Sasha, to support your health and your well-being? Like, what have you got in place just for yourself as a woman?
Yep. Well, sorry, I sound like I'm harping on about it, but I use that NESTS acronym on the daily. So, what I mean by that, Jo, I use it in multiple ways, is to use it as a basically like a check-in tool, an audit tool for myself. So to be mindful of, like if something's not feeling right, if I'm feeling, off, whatever, to check in and say, okay, well, what have I not done today or over the course of the week? So it can then reorientate to me about where my priorities need to land. And for me, that's a really critical aspect. One of the examples that you said in the intro piece, Jo, in that I'm 44, but my youngest child is 3. So I was pregnant in my 40th year, and my eldest is 10. So I've got, I suppose in some respects, young kids, older age. And where I was going with that is my life is very busy, and work and family commitments and all the things. So, and this again is a conversation that I'm having with women, is to have a flexible approach to meeting their health and wellbeing needs, in my opinion, is really critical. So having that overarching sort of, I guess, framework to know what I've got to pay attention to and keep on my radar, but implement that, I suppose, action that in a flexible way. So for me, that is, I'd like to say I've got the morning and the evening routine. I just don't. I have my ideas about what I'd like to do, and I try and keep some reference to that. But if I'm too fixated on that, and I've got a sick child, I've got a child that won't go to sleep, I've got to work late, my childcare arrangements fall through, whatever it might be, then that can set up a bit of a spiral, I guess, of frustration and unhelpful thoughts if I can't do the thing that I was planning on doing. So although this takes a bit of preparation, I like to basically be prepared. So when it comes to particularly things like exercise and movement, so being able to catch little windows. So I call these micro moments, being able to catch micro moments that are going to support my well-being. So that might be some simple stretches when I'm waiting for the kettle to work, for example. It's not going for a run, but it's better than doing nothing. Another example of that is bringing mindfulness into everyday activities. I feel like this is such a powerful tool. Yes, of course, sitting meditation, having focus periods of meditation, without a doubt, is so foundational and important to our well-being. And I'm not saying don't do that, but if you're struggling to do that for whatever reasons, you can bring that same philosophy into the most, mundane other things that you've got to get done. Like, for me, I try when I'm in the car and I'm driving to be really intentional, bringing my awareness and focusing on my hands on the steering wheel, for example. My mind's going to pull me into all the things, but I practice bringing my mind back to that moment. For me, that's what mindfulness is, and that helps in so many ways. So they're sort of, I know that they're not specific things, Jo, and like I said, they don't tick all the sort of classic boxes, but for me, in this time of life that I'm at, the pressure and the capacity that I have, it's knowing having that overarching framework that helps guide me, helps orientate me to if I'm feeling off, or when things are going really well, I'm like, oh, look, why is that so? Because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And then to be really flexible and catch those small moments, down to the nitty gritty of always having some sort of exercise gear in my car. So if a moment, because I'm not always in exercise gear because I've got other, work clothes as well, if I can get to school half an hour earlier and walk around the block a few times because that window is opened up. So things like that, that's what I do on that sort of basic level, and then being, really intentional with my support network as well. I've got a post in draft, which hopefully I will get up on somewhere in some form today, or multiple forms, about, this will be a challenging one for many women, asking for help, seeking out help, outsourcing, all of those things, connecting with your friends. I had a very, again, same friend that I mentioned earlier, and she was expressing sort of frustration from her side of things of not being asked for help as a friend. It's not a burden, and that you're not seen as burdening in asking for help. That's why else would you have friends? And you're not just having friends to get you to help things, but why do you have friends? They're there for support. And I know for myself, that's what I value in being a friend. But when it comes to me reversing that role, I find that very hard.
You certainly aren't alone there, Sasha.
The key things that came to mind when I was thinking about that question, Jo.
Yeah, you've given some great examples there, and ones that I'm sure some women will be able to put into place very easily. Just that small one of having some exercise gear in the vehicle. How great's that? But awareness, isn't it? It's awareness the whole time, and that's right. Because I think we're so busy, or we tell ourselves we're so busy all the time, or we prioritize other things. We just don't have that awareness of what's going on in the present moment, and to bring yourself to the present moment is so important. And wellness is all about our 40 to 60 decisions we make in a day. It's not,
yes,
right, I've done my run for the day, that's it, so I can tick off the exercise boxes. As you said, it's that movement throughout the day when you can. Great advice. So what are you looking forward to as you age, Sasha? Is there something that, as you're becoming an older woman, what are you looking forward to the most?
I think it's really just, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to unfold, Jo. I think that's it. Like, I just feel really excited. I don't have specifics, really. Like, I'm really, and I know that you're in the thick of this. I'm so excited to see what unfolds for my kids, what their journey is going to be in life. But equally for myself, I'm just excited to see what the future holds, because in many respects, I feel like I'm just getting started. I know that's a real cliche, but I really do, feel that. Yeah.
But that's exciting to know that that's how you're feeling at this point, when the messages that we often get as women is that this is the end, rather than, for many of us, we're seeing this, we're either at the very start of something that's going to be new and exciting, and we don't know what's coming ahead. And that's great.
Yes.
We don't need to know. Yeah. I look forward to, because I love nothing more than seeing what my own children are doing and how their life is unfolding. Although that can be another tricky part, that I had a chat with somebody yesterday about that whole empty nest too, because again, we're redefining who we are.
Yeah.
So much of our life has been so busy looking after. Again, I use that word busy, but it can be, and you've got 4 children, so you know more than what I do with regards to that, on how to juggle so many things all at once, and then all of a sudden that can stop. So for some women, that's hard too.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Who are the older women you look up to as role models?
Jo, for me, there's standout sort of celebrity authors, people that have done amazing things in life historically and in our generation. And I look up to many people in that respect, but I feel like the people that give me the most inspiration are those closest to me. And that is the network of women that are around me, of all ages, younger women, but equally a lot of women that are older in age, chronological age than me, that are in my network. And what I guess unifies all of them is that they, in very different ways, are doing life in their own way. Some of that's, the traditional way that we've referenced in some respects, and others are doing things very differently and following their hearts. And they're the women that I look up to, both from a friendship level, and I've been so fortunate, and it's sort of embedded within the practice of psychology that we have supervisors or mentors that guide us in our clinical practice. So there's a lot of particularly women that I have in that space that I look up to. And then again, it's cliched, but they really are in my mind in terms of my own mother, but particularly my grandmothers, my immediate grandmothers, my further down the line. I do have them in my heart, very literally on a day-by-day basis, in terms of not just necessarily just guiding me, but giving me reference about what's possible as well, given what they have gone through. And that's probably one of the things that excites me then, is to see, not just for myself, but for future generations of women to come, what's going to be possible.
No, it is exciting to see, isn't it? And that quote, "You stand on the shoulders of giants," is one of those ones where I think the older you get, the more that you can take in as well, because we wouldn't be where we are today without the women who are behind us. And you feel fairly humbled with what they've done and the opportunities that they've allowed us to have. So, Sasha, we'll wind up very shortly. I've got one more question that I'll ask you, and it's, if you could look into the future, what do you hope that 80-year-old Sasha is going to say about current day Sasha?
It's a big one, Jo, to finish isn't it?
Just throw that one at you.
Yeah. And I am well versed in doing these sort of future self exercises, but nonetheless, every time I do it, I find them a very powerful sort of exercise, isn't it, to think of yourself?
Yes.
That you were brave, and you're on the right path, and you did good, I think.
I agree. I would be there saying exactly the same thing about you as well. And I value your time today, and I also value the connection that we've been able to make, because I see you as a very wise and a valuable person in my life. So thank you. And I'm sure the women who are listening today have picked up something for them. Everyone will have something different that they've picked up, but there will be something. So, Sasha, should women want to connect further with you and find out more about you and your work, where can they go?
Probably the easiest, Jo, is via Instagram. So my account is dr.sascha.k. So I'm sure you'll be able to put that link in there for me. But there's links there to I have my clinical psychology practice, which is the Silver Lining Collective. And then I have a separate business, which is more coaching, mentorship, personal development for women, less sort of therapeutically orientated, and that's Dr Sascha. So the links to that are all via my Instagram. So that's probably the easiest way.
And there is some work that you're starting to do now as well, isn't there? So if people can't come to see you, there's opportunities that they may work with you in different ways.
Yes. And that's, yes, definitely, Jo, in terms of being able to connect, online through courses and membership, which I've had running for most of this year, which is a truly humbling experience and just so powerful. So it's a small, what I call my inner circle, women's circle group, and it is across the ages, women of all different experience. And I'm really keen to, which I've done, I do this work face to face, but being able to extend that with it to have a greater reach of bringing women together across generations to sit down and share of experience. As I said, like what I'm basically, the stories that I've shared with you today, that I'm in such a privileged position to be able to talk with women in a deep and intimate way at all stages of womanhood, from little girls through to older women. And I just really feel it's so powerful to, again, come back to the stuff that we've known since time began, to sit in circles and have conversations, to know that you're not alone, to share how you've gone through similar times in your life. So that's really the premise of my inner circle program or program and groups, to bring women together, have those conversations. Also talk about, the skills and knowledge part as well. How can you build your toolkit to be able to navigate certain challenging periods of life? So they're the main things for me at the moment.
Well, I certainly can recommend that I went, had a retreat with Sasha, and it was an incredible day spent with Sasha and learning so much. So I can well and truly, should you ever offer those again, and I'm sure you will, that is something that I can highly recommend people go to.
Thank you, Jo. And everything that you said before, I mirror straight back at you. I've been so grateful from I said it to you the other day, Instagram voice message that you left me a couple of years ago now, which touched my heart so much. And we've since developed this, what I believe to be a really beautiful relationship and connection. And I'm so grateful as well. And thank you for having me on into your community to be able to share some of those messages also.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
You too. Thanks, Jo.
Thanks so much, Sasha.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another Redefining Midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.